Okay, very good. So we are live. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Connect Africa. And I say welcome to my guests. They're not guests anymore, of course, but yeah, welcome. So yeah, we are here today to reflect on the peace talk that has just been brokered 2 days ago, the Ethiopia peace deal in Pretoria on 2nd of November. What it was for me, let me just throw this. For me, it was kind of symbolic because it was today, that the conflict started 2 years ago, November 4, 2020. Just on the eve of that, this happened. It's kind of closing a circle. Hopefully, it will remain so. We have lost. I just, first of all, welcome Dr. Biniam. Welcome, Brother Gabra Hewitt. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, that you are here with us to share your reflection. It's a Pan-African media platform, so we try to discuss it in a way that what it will mean for Ethiopia, for the region, but at large also for Africa. Yeah, so I just want to do this for all the lives that has been lost during these 2 years, and also, for those soldiers who have been massacred, but also along the 2 year, for all the lives that has been lost. I will ask you maybe 5 seconds of silence. I think that it's proper. It's the right time to do it. Yeah, so thank you. Let's start with Dr. Biniam. What is, the 2 years war or conflict, at least on paper? I think so far, I don't think we heard that in still saying the guns are not silenced, at least for the past 48 hours. A peace deal have been brokered. Just share with us your reflection.
Yeah, I think many were not expecting what transpired in this particular document that they signed on, and it was I think at the very difficult process for Ethiopian government, particularly. With the kind of pressure that was put on it. But it turned out, stood its ground. I mean, the negotiators did stunningly well, stood their ground, pushed the agenda forward, and in the best interest of everybody. And I think that must be underlined. It was in the best interest of people of Tigray. It was in the best interest of Eritrea, the best interest of the region. Yeah. TPLF must dissolve. That was, we need to, if we have to silence the gun, TPLF must dissolve. And all the atrocities committed throughout this past 2 years, it was due to this aggression TPLF has unleashed upon us. And so many lives lost, and it shouldn't have been this way. Everything could have been sorted out at the round table, and TPLF was offered so many opportunities for that. Peace was meant to prevail for the region in a number of ways. Ethiopia, Eritrea coming together, Somalia coming on board. We were expecting also Sudan to come on board and expanding that regional integration, economic as well as political integration of the region. And this was a significant step towards making our region one hospitable for all of us, yeah, for every citizens of this region. What TPLF has done is basically dragged us down through this mud, this bloody path, which wasn't something anybody expected. And so many leeways were given to the TPLF leaders, so many opportunities. Local elders had approached them, some even at the behest of the federal government, others an independent initiatives trying to bring TPLF with the newly emerged Prosperity Party. That could have taken us to a much better, stronger region and countries. We have been dragged through this. It was a costly war, human, social. You must understand the amount of displacement and instabilities that has caused. The cost, the human, the social, the economic cost, we will keep on counting this for years to come. And I think if it has come to this, and many of us are trying to be optimistic, but cautiously optimistic. And I hope that this would somehow materialize into a substantive change for all of us in that region. And peace should prevail at all costs. And I think we have to bear that in mind. I think it's enough a reflection for now. And if you have any question, then we'll pursue them in a little bit.
Thank you, Dr. Binyam. Brother Gabriel, so I come to you. Many, news from in the continent, international news, have been reporting ever since the peace brokered. Some say it's a surprise. Some started already to question it. But in all, it has been supported and welcomed, I think, by all. What's your reflection on this?
Well, actually,
Before we go to the news, let's hear your own reflection.
I think for myself, to honor, let's say, what has been requested, I would not question the motives of any of the parties, nor any of the commitments they've made. But I think it's good to discuss in terms of how you framed it there. If everyone is welcoming it, and if everyone that is outside of Ethiopia, outside of Tigray, if everyone is welcoming it and supporting it, is a very good start. And as a departure point, I think right now the EU and the US have already started to use language that undermine the peace deal or the permanent cessation of hostilities. Simply put, they're already trying to put priorities. They've put priorities through the official channels. Joseph Borrell has tweeted about it. Secretary Blinken from the USA has tweeted about it. They've put out documents through Ned Price, the US spokesperson. They've put out a statement in which they have tried to reorder the priorities that were agreed in the peace deal, in the permanent cessation of hostilities. Now, that is not a supportive measure. This is because it's not a criticism of either the TPLF or the Ethiopian government. I think it's fair to make it. I do not think the US is behaving or the EU are behaving as partners to this peace. And that is not the only indication, in my view, but there are other indications. But this is the most official one. In their official speeches, they're trying to reorder the priorities. That is a problem. Another, I think, complication is what Dr. Binyam just mentioned about this being about peace in the Horn of Africa. Because obviously, Ethiopia's issues with Sudan are critical to peace in Ethiopia and peace in Tigray. Ethiopia's relationship vis-a-vis Somalia, Somaliland, and Djibouti are critical vis-a-vis the US and Russia. And so knowing how all of these partners behave is important. And I think so far they have not said anything that would stand against the peace process, but but they've only supported it without going into detail in what they hope to see. So I think there's also a bit of caution there. They are quite supportive verbally and officially in official channels. We do not know if that will translate to active engagement, because we do need their engagement. If, for example, one party or the other was to complain about something happening on a border, neighbors on that border are the ones who are best placed to say or help resolve them. It's not necessarily going to come out of the structures that are agreed in the details in the peace deal. And there are agreed structures, the committee of experts and the rest. So I think that's another point to take in. And on the other hand, I think so far the Ethiopian government has not put out any negative statements about what's happening in terms of implementation. Neither have the TPLF. And I think that's a good thing. I think both have maintained their quiet. Their allies, both of them have allies that have been very trying to create narratives around the peace deal that are not helpful, especially TPLF supporters based in the United States, like the Tigray Media House TV, which has more or less said this peace deal doesn't exist. So I mean, of course they're not official channels; they're just supporters, but they are influential politically. The same in Ethiopia. There are allies of the government that are not happy with everything. So I think we're going to have to see as the time goes on. Both parties, the people who have signed, the parties who have signed, seem to be adhering to it. You see countries like Turkey, countries like, and then institutions like the Arab League, the Islamic Council, International Islamic Council, saying we can help. These are the things we can do. We've seen the Catholic Church and the Ethiopian Orthodox Church and dissenters from the Ethiopian Orthodox Church also saying we'd like to help in a positive way. And I think that's positive. You do need institutional support to get these things done. I think, as Dr. Binam said, I mean, and as you said also, that's generally positive. I'm very hopeful. But I think we should be wary of some of the things that are coming out. For example, Human Rights Watch and others have already started to push back, saying, no, there is on the war propaganda, on the disinformation, and they are using the propaganda that was used by the TPLF, saying, actually, no, we want to hold that line. They're trying to reiterate their positions. They're trying to entrench their positions. You see the Fletcher School has a director, that's Tufts University in the US, has a director that is very close to the TPLF, to the extent that he used to have drinks with their central committee when they were meeting. I mean, he's very close with them. He's already come out on BBC and other Western outlets to try and undermine the peace. So we can see definitely there's still a lot of Western opposition to peace here. And I think we have to be honest that will, down the line, that is a complication both parties have to deal with. Both TPLF will have to find ways to implement the peace deal that they've signed, while maintaining some legitimacy with their population and with these partners of theirs. So will the Ethiopian government. I remain hopeful, but I think we have to be wary of the problems and the obstacles that are on path for this peace deal. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Gerber Hewitt. I do have a question based on your answer. Let's go to first Dr. Binyam. Let's talk about Eritrea, who has been, of course, dragged to this war after TPLF attacked. And then now in this peace deal, it's just between the Ethiopian government and TPLF. First of all, if you can share with us how was that, welcome, or what was the reaction from the Eritrean government, and as a citizen and as an intellectual, also, what's your comment on that? You can also extend it regionally.
Okay, two things. Yeah. First, how did Eritrea get dragged into this? TPLF had a very specific agenda, a region change agenda. Yeah, it has been a long-standing agenda, which was delegated to this organization by the US and its partners. Yeah, it was a very clear one. And all this border conflict was just a decoy to basically drag Eritrea into constant insecurity and keep it hostage for a very long time and hope that it would implode. Meles Zenawi had said that, yeah, want to change the regime in Eritrea, and we have asked the US to help us. Whether the US asked them to help or TPLF asked the US, it doesn't matter. But that was what was entrusted to TPLF. And soon after the 2018 peace accord between Eritrea and Ethiopia, everybody was excited. But the only organization that did not find that very appealing was the TPLF. In fact, it wanted to use that as an opportunity to destabilize Eritrea. And in fact, they were coming out sending people into the street to demonstrate against the peace accord itself. And it was very bizarre for many of us at the time. So you need to understand. And this 2020 was a continuation of that. Yeah? So it went beyond just attacking the Northern Command that was based in that region, and apparently in hot pursuit of the Northern Command. TPLF was already encroaching into Eritrean territory and was bragging, and their supporters were dancing to the capture of San'afa and deep into Eritrean territory and occupying some land. And this is the part that wasn't said much in many of the discourse around this. And of course, the missiles that were fired in multiple cities. People talk about Asmara, but in multiple cities. So Eritrea got involved in this as a fundamental prerequisite to defend itself. And of course, stability in Ethiopia is also stability in Eritrea. So those conditions were what were guiding Eritrea's engagement in this conflict. And the West and others want to pretend that Eritrea doesn't have a stake in this, or Eritrea is not going to be destabilized by it. So that's a very critical point there. Yeah, why is that they pretend that Eritrea doesn't have interest in this, not being affected by this conflict? It is affected by this conflict, and TPLF had been actively working to trying to destabilize Eritrea, and that had to be said. Now, the second element is how does Eritrea see this peace accord? And there you need to distinguish between citizens and the Eritrean government. Eritrean government is quiet, hasn't said anything, no announcement. Perhaps I would say be cautious and be optimistic at the same time. But from Eritrean side, many of them are very much wary of TPLF. No, this is a regime not to be trusted. The discourse is basically very much negative. Burned so often now you're not going to trust them at all, even if they are keen to address this problem peacefully, resolve it peacefully. The Eritreans are not seeing this as something to be trusted. Let's wait and see, as many of the narratives that I hear and I see. But of course, looking at the document itself and some of the points mentioned, it is basically TPLF is surrendering, effectively disarming. It's a good thing for Eritrea. The government of Ethiopia taking charge of the region and putting law and order, all that mentioned in this accord is a good thing, as many have pointed out. And of course, being in the border, trying to protect, no aggression from either side of the border, it says. And people are saying that's also a good thing, So once again, let's wait and see. The TPLF is not to be trusted. Already we've seen the sign, as Gary had mentioned. It's not only the US and the Europeans are somehow watering it down and subverting. There's a double speak in what they say. They say they support the peace, but at the same time they want to continue the TPLF's aggression, somehow to resuscitate TPLF and emerge again as a player in that region. That's what they want to achieve, and that's what they want to pursue. But you will see also, and locally, the manufactured news, conflict has continued, and the guns have not silenced, and Ethiopian government is, sending drones again. All that is being used, and I'm sure there are a number of hardliners within that, particularly the youth elements within the TPLF, and probably some of them have emerged as independent parties, but initially they were part of the TPLF youth brigade, and they're very much radicalized and thinking probably the only way to emerge victors out of this is through war and continued war, even if it means something that would take 30 years, like Eritrea had spent 30 years, and we should also follow suit. That's the kind of argument some of them have been throwing around. At any cost is what they claim to push there. So we try to be hopeful, but within reason, within element of skepticism. Yeah. I would say from the Eritrean side, there's a lot of skepticism, but very much also hopeful, and want to support this particular peace we all benefit from. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Binyam, for that. Brother Gabrahiwet, from what you said about this peace deal, and then I have been reading also some of your posts in the next hours after the peace deal, how the mainstream media is also pushing this negative propaganda, and that's one, but mainly also, taking into consideration that the fact that you have worked with the federal government before. In the peace deal, there were TPLF, and also there was TDF in a way, not TDF. Who do we call now? General Adkan? I don't know, but he say out that he called himself, he's not TPLF, but something as he's part of the Tigray government, something like that. Do you think, this could be, of course, based on from your experience or your own analysis, that somehow TPLF, surprised us, and this surprise might not stay. Somehow there's something cooking, and the fact that both General Adkan, who says he's not part of TPLF, but still part of the peace deal, will it strengthen it? What is the meaning behind? What could be the motive? What will it mean, or what does it mean?
Well, I think, as I said, we have to be optimistic, and I will adhere to the request by the signatories, by saying that I'll adhere to the request by the signatories by not undermining their positions or questioning them. Tzadkan, for the purposes of Ethiopian law, and they're signing now for this to be implemented under Ethiopian law, and that is the sovereign law of the land. He's part of the TPLF army. He was the leader of it. He was the general. That is how it is seen in this peace deal as well. So yes, you're right that they built in a lot of ambiguity in the peace deal. That may be an oversight. It may be intentional. We do not know. We can only see as the days go on. The Ethiopian government has not has not shown themselves to be unhappy with the way he was included in the peace process. So as long as both signatories to the peace process are happy, I think we'll have to see. Having said that, I think that something does come up. You've hit on into the mainstream media and the rest, and Dr. Binyam has also hit upon the issue that there is a problem of the US and the EU still having an agenda of regime change in Eritrea, and that is a clear problem. If we go back to the Jeddah agreement, where Eritrea and Ethiopia, so the Nobel, well, that's why Dr. Abiy won the Nobel Peace Prize. The agreement was made, and the reason why all the details are not public is that America and Europe were unhappy with it. I mean, the Prime Minister had to say on TV that we have ambassadors here trying to get our internal documents, trying to steal them, questioning us every day. This is not appropriate. I mean, it reached that level. And I think the US and the EU still see Eritrea as an enemy, and they still see TPLF as a tool to attack their enemy. That puts Eritrea in a very difficult position. I mean, I don't know how they see that relationship playing out, but as Dr. Binam just said, if the ENDF is managing the external borders of Ethiopia, it does mean that the external borders of Ethiopia will be determined between ENDF, or rather Ethiopian government, and Eritrea, which basically removes the biggest means of attacking the peace deal that TPLF have. Because, of course, they claim some lands that the Ethiopian government has accepted is Eritrean land under the Algiers peace deal. So, if the peace deal is implemented well, I think it shall provide guarantees to both the Eritrean government and generally in the Horn about the Eritrean war. So I think that will be good. The US, the EU, mainstream media, human institutions, Western aligned institutions like Human Rights Watch have come out, their managers, some of their directors have come out to stand against the peace deal. The rationale, from my point of view, from experience working with them both within the Ethiopian government and with the NGOs. While I was working for NGOs, I did work a lot with Human Rights Watch in Nigeria, in South Sudan. They are not happy with Eritrea and Ethiopia being at peace. They do want to pursue a project of regime change. It is part of the liberal hegemonic ambition, as Mearsheimer puts it. He's an international relations expert in the Chicago School in Chicago, in the US. I mean, so that is a difficulty, and I think Eritrea, as Dr. Binyam said, has decided to navigate it with careful optimism. So they are very, very prepared for defense, but accepting of all measures for peace. And I think that is the best posture that anybody in Ethiopia can have, including us. We should always prepare for the worst and then always work towards the best possible outcome, the most optimistic. So I think, yes, I'll end on that note. Thank you.
And the EU all applaud the efforts by the two parties towards restoring peace.
Hello, Kwame. I think you're on.
Yeah. Okay. So, thank you, thank you, Brother Gabriel. That was really interesting to hear. As a person who have been followed this for the past 2 years, you still hear every day, even things that you have taken for granted that you know about. There are new things that are coming out. Welcome, Kwame. So, do you hear us? We don't hear you, so that we can check also if everything is good.
Yes, I can hear you. I can hear you.
Yeah, so good. You missed a bit, but it's just on time. So we talked about generally first the brother Binyam and the brother Gabriel have shared their reflection on the peace deal, and then there was another question that we have discussed. So let me just come to you. What is your reflection, brother Kwame? Maybe I do a short introduction or brief introduction. He's from Ghana, but mainly he's not. He's Pan-Africanist, he's staunch Pan-Africanist. You met on the same platform, I think, with brother Binyam before. We have Gabriel here today. Yeah.
Greetings.
Yeah, so share your reflection as a person who have followed, you followed this for the past 2 years. Was it a surprise? Did it take you by surprise, the peace deal?
Yes, greetings to everyone. Greetings to my brothers, my African brothers, and greetings to you, Malet. Greetings to the viewers who are watching Connect Africa, where we come to deliberate about issues concerning our continent. We have been following strongly the events in Ethiopia since the last 2 years, and I think the agreement itself did not come so much as a surprise on my side, because we expected this. We expected that the moves which the Prime Minister was making were very, the moves he was making, they were very wise, if I may say. He's a man of a lot of wisdom. And I think that he has close to him very, very, strong people, very wise people who are giving him very good advice. His handlers, I think they are very good, who are sitting close to him and advising him on what to do. When you look at his moves, he understands. This is someone who understands Ethiopia as a country. He understands it very well. He understands the region. If you look at what he has been doing, and on top of that, he understands imperialism and he understands geopolitics. If you look at how he's been playing, so he has played his cards very well. He's patient, very, very patient, even when majority of us who are outside were putting a lot of pressure on him to go into Tigray and crush the rebellion. But he held his cards and he held himself back, and he was patient a little bit until things played out and we were able to understand what he was about, what he was trying to do. And things have come to play out. Of course, any sensible, these talks, which have been led by the African Union, any sensible person knows that the African Union would not, or any African would not accept that there is any concessions for the Ethiopian government to make. So apart from drafting the agreement in a way that and terming it as an agreement, but this was supposed to be a document of declaration of victory. Actually, from when you read the document, I've read the whole document from the start to the end. It was supposed to be a document of declaration of victory, if you look at it carefully. So there's no one sensible enough who would have accepted that TPLF has any legitimate claims, to power, to make any demands. Looking at the fact that TPLF was not elected democratically, it is not the one in power. It was not elected by the people, so it has no right, to the country to claim that it wants to overthrow the government which was elected. And besides that, the government in Addis Ababa is not these petty governments which you see around the continent, which are being controlled from external powers, from external forces. They are being controlled by external forces, and I think that even the leaders on the continent themselves, they are very much aware of that. So the people at the African Union themselves, they are very much aware of that this Prime Minister Abiy is one of the strongest leaders we have, one of the sensible leaders we have on the continent. So it is just evident, that this agreement, came out the way it came, that this is the type of agreement which we got out of this. And going forward, I think I'm very optimistic that the implementation, will be successful. Because if you look at how weakened the TPLF itself is, already Ethiopia was in Mekele by the time they are, they are negotiating, and Mekele is the capital. So the government has already taken over the capital. So this TPLF, it was this agreement was conceding defeat. They were supposed to concede defeat, but even if they had not conceded defeat, I think that they were going to to be defeated, because the federal government is so powerful. It has all this army, and they don't have enough tools. And in the northern side, you have Eritrea, okay, and these people, I think Eritrea also has a grudge, with this group of people, because they were they are the ones who were terrorizing, Eritrea and isolating it, before it separated itself from the country. So I think that they had no chance, and this agreement was bound, to be the way it is. The Prime Minister has built up a lot of leverage around the continent, not only, in the region, but even around the continent. So he had a lot of support, and this is someone who came to shape, he has almost shaped the African Union and how it is working. So you see that now everyone all of a sudden is talking about African solutions to African problems. But if it was not for the Prime Minister Abe to insist that African solutions to African problems, all these people, wanted to parrot, the neo-colonial narrative, talking about human rights, talking about going around, weaponizing this human rights issue, as if we are the greatest violators of human rights, or, in the world, as if Africans are the greatest violators of human rights in the world. So the greatest violators of human rights, when you examine carefully, you could see, you can see that they are Europeans, they are the Anglo-Saxons, they are the United States, which is destroying countries all over. So it's not Africans. So I think that these are things which the Prime Minister Abiy himself understood very well. He understood this very well and understood how to play. So all of a sudden, everyone is now, saying African solutions to African problems. He has shaped the narrative of the African Union even itself. So he has built up a lot of leverage. Now, when it comes to going forward, what we should expect during the implementation, like I said, I expect it to be successful, but not without challenges. Like we have seen, these people who have been defeated, I'm talking about the West, that wanted to penetrate into Ethiopia and destroy the government because of certain reasons, of course. We know those reasons. Ethiopia was the fastest, growing economy on the African continent, until the advent of COVID. Ethiopia is very close to the Gulf of Eden and the Suez Canal. They don't want anyone powerful around this place. And Ethiopia made huge advances, in its cooperation. Immediately, the Prime Minister was sworn in. He went to visit Eritrea to try to mend relations with Eritrea. They don't want this. Ethiopia is very close to Russia. You saw that the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Russia Sergei Lavrov, when he came to Africa, Ethiopia is one of the places where he visited. Ethiopia has a lot of resources right now, has a lot of gold, a lot of oil discovered. So these are all reasons why these imperialists want to come in and overthrow. And this is a government which has proved, this is a prime minister who has proved that his orientation is Pan-African, and Pan-Africanism, they look at it as a threat. In the West, they look at Pan-Africanism as a threat. Even when you look at the memoranda NSC 46, this is a memo which was written in the 1970s. I think it was written to President Carter. And in that document, the NSC 46, which you can even find on Google, they mentioned the Pan-Africanism as a threat to them. So they look at Pan-Africanism or anyone with Pan-African sentiments as a threat to Western civilization. So these are all reasons why the United States would attack us. So what am I trying to say? What I'm trying to say is that the victory has been achieved. I call it victory by the Prime Minister and the Ethiopian and the people who have been defending, Ethiopia and the continent. And the Africans in general, definitely, we have achieved this victory. But this victory is not going to be without challenge. Definitely, these people, as I have enumerated the various reasons why they will come back, they are going to continue, to destabilize, to want to destabilize the place, to put a brake on the growth of the region, the growth of Ethiopia itself, the growth of the region. As you have seen, they tried even to sabotage the East African oil pipeline, or East African crude oil pipeline. Europeans, they are trying to say we should not build that pipeline, from western part of Uganda to Tanga, to the port in Tanga in Tanzania. So these are all, strategies, you see. So I see that we will be able, I think, to hold this victory that has been achieved. The Prime Minister going forward, I think he's wise enough, he's strong enough, he's informed enough, he's knowledgeable enough, and he has very good handlers sitting close to him. So this is what I see. But the victory and the agreement, what came out, I think that was expected. There's no way we could have, agreed to something that is outside the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Ethiopia. So this is my outlook.
Muted. Thank you. Thank you, Kwame, for that. Yeah, I do agree with you. I mean, that phrase of African solution to African problems have been dusted, the Ethiopian government have dusted off from the document there. I mean, because the phrase is there even in during the establishment of the Organization of African Unity, but it has been, Ethiopia has wisely made use of it during the Grand Ethiopia Renaissance Dam dispute now during the conflict. I do agree on that point. I am assuming we all have read the document, what has been signed jointly. Do you see anything, that should have been, Brother Binam, I will start with you, that should have been there or that it is missing? What are, we have, I think, more or less discussed the opportunities, but yeah, let's speak in general, the opportunities and challenges. What is it missing? Was there something that seems excluded, or yeah?
Thanks, Marlet.
Yes, before you start,
Yeah.
and that might hinder also, because we are concluding as we do around, what might hinder the implementation of this agreement.
Yeah. I think in this document, the spirit is far more important to me. Yeah. There's elements that is very much solid. Yeah. But the details are always going to be very tricky. Yeah. You can't just put a fine print for everything in a negotiation like this. Yeah, especially a complex one for that. For example, it says a strict timeline. Yeah? They should be meeting at this particular period, and they would have to deal with the disarmament in this particular period. A month is already given to that. Yeah, 5 days to deal. I mean, those things, they could drag forever, depending on who you're dealing with. Okay, it's very difficult to somehow pin down into a specific timeline. But having time frame is always good as well. Yeah, you will see what targets you are needing to achieve in a particular given time frame. Yeah, that's what it means. But the complications you should understand. There will be, obviously, TPLF is going to come out, or those young guys are saying, they're not going to disarm. What are we going to say to that? And different groups and a splinter group said, no, they're not going to hand over the tanks that they have or the missiles that they have buried somewhere. It's all going to add complications. And remember, TPLF always use those small groups, to say, oh, it's them, not us. Strategy they have always used. Yeah, they mobilize certain groups and which they control from behind, and they would claim that they are creating chaos. But we want to emphasize the spirit is far more important. If the spirit is respected, in its entirety, then we will be able to see a solid piece being formulated. But that's very hard to come by, especially when you have a very strong powers who are hell-bent in undermining this, because they feel that this is a loss for them. And once again, I think it was raised. Maybe Eritrea is noted as the state that those countries seems to mention regularly. But Ethiopia has also a serious problem with them in many respects. And the reason why I say that is because if Ethiopia is going to choose its foreign policy independently of them, they're not going to accept that. That's why they keep telling Ethiopians that, no, you cannot deal with Eritrea. You must sever your relation with Eritrea. Even the relationship between Eritrea, Ethiopia, and Somalia, it was a piece of code. It was a perfect start for regional integration, stability, and moving forward. But they did not like that. Why is that? And China, on the contrary, wants those countries integrated. I'll just give you a very simple example. The U.S. in the early, the aftermath of the Second World War, when it came out as a victor, it wanted Eritrea, Ethiopia, and Somalia integrated into one country, run from the center, Ethiopia, from Addis. That's what they wanted. But now that they want us all separated, we can't even be at peace with each other. That's the kind of foreign policy they try to impose on the region, and it's not acceptable. Remember, they try to undermine this tripartite agreement. They wrote so many documents, and every Harry and Kane came out saying this is going to undermine IGAD, but they never mentioned that the East African community, that's including Tanzania, Kenya, Uganda, Congo, is that undermining IGAD? There's always an overlap, but then I don't know where they got that idea. Of course, for Eritrea, Ethiopia, and Somalia leadership, this wasn't just about the three of them. It was going to be Horn of Africa, eventually embracing Djibouti and incorporating Sudan and South Sudan, and possibly also Kenya. That's the kind of future that they had in mind. But it was a start, and this start just did not go down very well with the Americans for some reason, because it is going to create a foreign policy independence for Ethiopia, Eritrea, and Somalia as well. They did not like the fact that Eritrea always displayed an independent foreign policy. That didn't go down very well for them. Even at the UN vote against Russia, Eritrea voted in favor of Russia. Apparently, it looked like in favor of Russia. And the charge d'affaires that left Eritrea, American charge d'affaires that left Eritrea, he complained. Why is that? The Eritreans voted against us while they're not even benefiting from a relation with Russia. They're not getting anything. And Eritrea said, no, we want to have a policy independence. Yeah, we want to have independent ideas that are not always going to be shoved down our throats, and that's what they don't like. But in any case, that they are hell bent in undermining this peace process. We're already seeing a double speak. Gerber has pointed out very well. There is a double speak in every statement that they make. They somehow reorganizing it, reprioritizing it. The disarming is being subdued and being silent. Even the media campaign, you could see that they're not even talking about the disarmament. They're talking about permanent cessation of hostility, and it ends there. And there is a concerted campaign by the NGOs as well. The NGOs that so-called NGOs that they are operating all over under the guise of humanitarianism. We are seeing through them now. So if we should be very, very worried that they are going to sabotage it. If not TPLF, they would sabotage it. But I also suspect elements within TPLF are not happy with this arrangement, particularly the disarming parts. Yeah. And it was very clear that, I like the fact that it was very specific, what kind of weapon must be taken out and what can be retained in order to maintain law and order. Yeah, and assuming that is going to be around what you would call the Khalil Liu Hai, yeah, the special forces and the kind of weapons that they are allowed to have. Yeah, obviously Tigray would have to have special forces like all other Khalils in Ethiopia, but then that dynamics itself is going to be very much problematic. But we'll see. Yeah. At least it's a step. There is a start, and TPLF is significantly reduced. Its political life is going to be reconfigured in one way or another, and I'll be looking forward to that. And once again, cautiously optimistic. Thank you.
Mahalet, you're on mute. And Kwame is away from the screen.
Okay, thank you for that note. No, I was saying thank you. Yeah, thank you, Brother Binyam. Really, there are things that I took. Yeah, it's indeed, of course, with all the details of the weapons. They should be allowed what other regional forces have as well with the new administration. But it's up the whole this regional force is something that needs to be dealt. Yeah. Coming to you, Brother Gabrahiwat, what do you think it's possible to disarm TPLF as it's planned and written in the agreement without really dealing with those who are supplying the arm?
Let me first start by linking something Dr. Binyam and Brother Kwame said that I think is essential. And I think it's two sides of the same coin. So Dr. Binyam was explaining how the West tries to pressure through various means, media, their own direct means, pressure Ethiopia and other countries to a certain policy posture and even internal policies. And these internal policies, because NGOs are essentially implementers of policy. So it's a question whose policy they implement. And they also pressure through the UN, for example, the WFP, the UNICEF. They sit on what's called cluster systems, where they have MOUs with the federal government and they try to drive policy. That is their job. That is their function. They are not elected by the Ethiopian people. They are not representative of the Ethiopian people. The managers of these organizations do not live in Ethiopia. If the sewers break, they live in Washington, D.C., or they live in Rome, or they live in Paris. So what is the purpose of that driver of policy change is important. In my view, and the view of some, it reduces the authority of the federal government. And this comes to what Brother Kwame said. It's about imperialism, because imperialism, since Britain first fought the Songhai Empire in West Africa, has been about delegitimizing the rulers, the people in authority of the target countries. That has been, for 600 years, without question, a strategy employed by imperialists. So this is two sides of the same coin. The more you delegitimize a party and legitimize your own cat's paw, your own proxies amongst the population through NGOs, because there are people who listen to NGOs. I have my best friend since I was 16 no longer talks to me because he believes what Human Rights Watch says. During this war, I worked for the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission. I wrote a report specifically on the war crimes that were detailed in some relations here by the Human Rights Watch. He would prefer to trust the analysis of Human Rights Watch to the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission, which is populated by Ethiopian professionals, which is managed by Ethiopian professionals, which is overseen by Ethiopian parliament, in which his own best friend worked. He would prefer to trust a white man called Kenneth Roth before he trusts us. And that is because of the delegitimization of authority of Ethiopian institutions. And that is important. That is how imperialism functions. Now, to go back to what you first said about some of the obstacles and what's not in this peace deal and link it to the question about the disarmament, there is no reflection of this issue. Right now, what I would have preferred, what would have given me a lot more trust about this peace deal is if it dealt with issues of legitimacy directly. Right now, it has articles within it about legitimacy. For example, we mentioned the elections. They are going to be done by the National Election Board. The transitional government is going to be agreed. That is a temporary legitimacy until elections can happen under the Ethiopian constitutional process. The whole point the TPLF made to start this war was that they do not consider the National Election Board legitimate. That attacks our entire constitutional system. That attacks our current government's authority. And while all other opposition, ONLF, OLF, Kanijit, Gimbot Sawat, everyone who was in the bush for 27, 30 years, including some famous EPRP members like Marsha Yosef, who we never thought would ever trust the Ethiopian constitution as it is written today, have accepted the legitimacy of the Ethiopian constitution and its process. The only people who are opposing it now, today, are the people who wrote it, the TPLF. And they are doing so at the behest of imperial powers. So what Brother Kwame said there and what Dr. Binyam said there links directly to what you just asked about law and order. Because now, as Dr. Binyam said, we have to come and say, as part of the peace process, we have to do a disarmament here. You have to give us these weapons. This new transitional administration will have to arrange for law and order. That means federal police will have to manage security here. Federal military will have to manage the response in ABC. And when you start saying these things, and when you start enacting that sovereign legitimacy, that sovereign authority, that is when imperialists attack, and that is what they attack. And they have already started. And this is my worry. America, the EU, when they say this is a cessation of hostilities, and the first priority should be humanitarian access. What they are saying is it is not a priority that the Ethiopian government has no sovereign authority. Now, if in the UK or in the US, I was to come and say the Home Office or the Department of Homeland Security, it's not important that you're in charge of security. I'm going to deliver aid. They will shoot me. It's that simple. That is how government runs. That is what government means. You govern, right? Now TPLF has sovereign de facto authority over Tigray. Now, it is important, though, that issue is resolved. That the issue of whether or not the TPLF is still considered legitimate within parts of Tigray is an important issue that even the Ethiopian government knows should be resolved, and they don't have a clear answer, which is why it is a staged process, in my view. This is my guess, which is why it's a staged process within the peace deal, that there will be a transitional period, then there will be elections. Now, Burtukan Mideksa is quite an honest woman. That's why we will trust the elections. She was opposition. We don't all agree with her previous ideological positions, but there is not a single person in Ethiopia that thinks that she's somebody's pawn. She has shown already demonstrably, she has shown that she's willing to stand up and accuse the government repeatedly. And she has shown when this crisis started and the government was trying to force an election, she refused during COVID to the detriment of the government. So, I mean, she is seen as an impartial arbiter. And she is, I think, in my view. Now, once the election happens, the TPLF may win. Sadkan may be the representative of Charchar. That's where he's from. Well, then, I have family in Charchar. We're going to have to learn how to deal. I mean, that's also, if they have legitimacy in their area, if that is their dejan, as our government repeatedly says, which is an important concept in Ethiopian politics. It is a very important concept. Then we're going to have to discuss as a country, through the public dialogue that is written into the peace deal, how that legitimacy will look and how that authority will be enacted. And that is sometime in the future that is deferred. Now we've given ourselves time, everybody to relax, to review, let the guns silence. That political question is still not resolved. And in my view, the biggest challenge now is the delegitimization of these institutions, including the police, including the military, including the election board, the delegitimization by Western institutions and powers. I remember during the last election, because Amnesty International and Refugees International said that they did not trust the election, people I know in Piazza, people that I know in Koshe Safar refused to vote. Because some white person that lives in Nairobi or Rome said so. And until we resolve that, this political problem will not be resolved at all. And I think the way Brother Kwame phrased that as an African issue is accurate. Since Meles Zenawi, it's not just Abiy, they have been trying to build an African consensus that constitutional authority, that constitutional legitimacy will rely on elections or internal institutional processes within a country and should not be left to attack by the West. And the AU's role in this peace deal has reinforced that. But we are far from over. We still have to do the actual disarmament, as Dr. Binyam said. We still have to reestablish the police. And then, as our brother Kwame said, we still have to show the legitimacy and authority of this government can be maintained. And I really do hope that Brother Kwame is right, that Ethiopia is governed by wise leaders and that they are taking us towards that resolution. I share in that hope. And I think, quite aside from hoping, I can do nothing more. So I'm going to pause there. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Gabriel. I don't know why I say Gabriel. Gabriel should be automatically the name, so I will say Gabriel.
Both
No,
are allowed.
really,
Both are allowed.
yeah.
I'm happy with
Okay, good. No, every time I sit behind this screen, no, I really, really love it, and it just motivates me because I learn a lot. Yeah. So really, thank you very much for that. Let's bring our speakers and. Yeah, so to Brother Kwame now. Brother Kwame, what do you think? Yeah, of course, you have touched upon about the challenge, and also I want you, to share with us how the African Union, what are the lessons learned for the African Union from this, and way forward, what can be done.
Yeah, I think it's okay if you don't remove the videos of other people for me. What I think there's great lessons for the African Union here. Many lessons, but I'll highlight out the fact that the African Union now going forward needs to start being a little bit more confident in itself. Okay, so confidence in the fact that as Africans we can solve our problems. If you look at this agreement, how it has been reached, this peace agreement, we tried, all the Africans tried very much to limit the participation of the United States, and this is what has angered the United States actually. You had it making a lot of proclamations that there is, terrorists who are going to attack in Johannesburg, and all these, trying to incite, violence in South Africa. So all these is because of the position which South Africa has taken. South Africa has taken a very strong position. If you have heard the Minister of Foreign Relations of South Africa, Madame Naleda Pandor, she has insisted how Africa has solved its problems. We are not going to accept, external interference. And actually, this was even captured in the agreement itself, the agreement which was signed by the federal government of Ethiopia and TPLF. It was captured that we would not accept, interference, any foreign interference. And I think this was taking a swipe at the West, because it is the one which has interfered. If you look at countries like Russia and China, they have insisted. Russia's, mission at the United Nations and the Chinese mission at the United Nations at the very beginning, when the West was trying to interfere in this. Russia and China, they mentioned that we believe the wisdom of Ethiopia and their ability to solve their own problems. We think that nobody should interfere. But the United States has continued to interfere, even in the talks. Russia and China is not there trying to interfere with the talks, but they are there. So the Africans, I think that they demonstrated the ability to solve a problem by themselves. And I think this is a very huge lesson for the African Union to learn, because to a certain extent, the African Union has been lacking confidence. Standing up, the leaders have been lacking the confidence to stand up for themselves and their own people. Because when they stand up for themselves, definitely they are standing up for us. But they have been lacking this confidence to stand up for us and assert themselves and say, this is what we want. And this is what the African people have been wanting, for all this long. The African leaders, when they do this, the African Union itself, also gets confidence. Because remember, the African Union doesn't have powers. The powers are in the heads of state. So when the heads of state stand up and they say the right thing, then the people at the African Union also get confidence. You can see that when South Africa stood, even after all these invitations to Washington, when they invited President Cyril Ramaphosa, I think President Cyril Ramaphosa made it very clear that we want to take an independent course as Africans. And when you hear what President Ruto also was saying, President Ruto also was moving along the same line which was started by President Uhuru Kenyatta. And what was that line? All of them were insisting that this problem has to be solved inside. We don't want external interference. So it has been very clear. When you go to the region, President Kagame also has stood in the same way. President Museveni, or in the region, when you go to Eritrea, very strong over there. You know, they cannot even go there to say anything. So all these trips, even when Blinken went to Senegal, he got the same message. So you see that when the leaders stand up and they say the right thing, then the African Union also gets a confidence. And I think that starting now, going forward with this, the African Union's ability to solve this and come up with this agreement, I think it needs to gain more confidence, not only in solving conflicts, around the continent. You can talk of the one which is almost breaking out right now in the Congo, because Congo is at loggerheads right now with Rwanda, but also the other conflicts. And solving these conflicts means stopping the interference of the West into the continent. That is what it means, because most of the conflicts on our continent are set up by these guys. You see what Mali has been up to, in the Sahel. Mali has made it clear and say that it has evidence that France has been, sponsoring, terrorists, in the region and destabilizing Mali. So this is why the people, resisted it. Burkina Faso is the same situation. And France has always found a way to come around. So why am I bringing up this when we are talking about Ethiopia? This is because the African Union has to stand up and has to understand and has to affirm that it understands the enemies of the continent. It is not just us fighting against each other without people fanning and the flames of conflict, of division. We already have our own problems. We already have our own problems of tribalism around the continent. I mean, when you talk about tribalism, you can go to Kenya and see what happened there in 2007, more than 3,000 people. You go to Nigeria, so these guys are always fanning these flames. So the only thing that can be blamed on the African Union is that sometimes it wants to toe the lines of these imperialists and put out statements, trumpeting and parroting what these people have said. So I think that the African Union now going forward has to be a little bit more confident in being able to solve these problems in its approach. And it is not only the conflict now, but I think when we come to financing also its activities, I think the African Union has to move in that direction and be confident that we can finance our own budgets. And this will be able to help us to win ourselves off this influence by the West, especially, who want to interfere in our activities, political, economic, and social, to social engineer our societies into something which looks like the West. And yet we don't want to be like the West. We are African people. We want to live as Africans. We want to live in our own identity, or what Kwame Nkrumah called the African personality. We want to live in that personality. We don't want to be Europeans. The challenges, this is what I see as an opportunity for the African Union. But going forward, I think that the challenges would be the continued sabotage, of course, by the United States. The United States would want to continue to sabotage, to poke. But this is not because it is going to win. I really don't believe that the United States now and the West has the ability to win here. What they are going to do is just to continue to agitate, okay, to see where there are weaknesses, and they want to exploit those weaknesses. You remember that from the beginning of this rebellion, when the Prime Minister went around the region, he was in Uganda, he was in Rwanda, communication with Kenya, communication with the Congo. He was having a lot of communication here, and he built up a lot of leverage. Okay, so this region, all of it was behind, Ethiopia. But there happened some small things whereby the son of the president in Uganda was posting things in support of TPLF. And this is some guy who is ignorant. This guy that is not someone who is knowledgeable about the African continent or the history of the continent or the history of the region even itself. It's just some guy who has grown up privileged. But the imperialists were very quick to jump on that. So I'm bringing this up for you to understand that they're going to look for ways of exploiting weaknesses. So they jumped on this to put out a narrative that Uganda is training the TPLF rebels. You see, because they thrive on the divide and conquer. That is how they thrive. So this was meant to isolate Ethiopia, to put a wedge between Ethiopia and Uganda, and then put a wedge between Ethiopia and Kenya. This was meant to isolate Ethiopia and separate it from the region so that they can get a chance to attack. You see? So, but the prime minister played it excellently well. He understood what was happening. Like I said when I was beginning, he understands the region. He understands imperialism. He understands neocolonialism and how it's played. He understands the West. What did he do? He went in and re-engaged. He went and re-engaged the region. So when these accusations were coming around, you could see that the ambassador of Ethiopia in Uganda went and met the president of Uganda. He went to State House, the official office of the president of Uganda, and they had these conversations. And all of a sudden, we saw this guy who was making these threats that he is going to support TPLF. Uganda's, the son to Uganda's president was invited to Ethiopia. So these are the strategic moves. This is why I say that this guy, Prime Minister Abiy, I think he has very wise counsel around him. He has very wise handlers, and he himself, I think, is a very wise leader. So he was not able to isolate himself from the region. He defeated them. He defeated that move. So this is what they are going to do, that they will continue, even though after, we have signed this agreement, they will continue to look for those weak points so that they can exploit them, and then they will come up with cases like, now we want the Human Rights Watch or Human Rights whatever to come and look into the situation, what happened in Tigray, so that we can, they are going to use intimidation, of course. We want to prosecute those people who participated in the war in Tigray. So all these things are going to start coming up. All of them are meant to exploit, either fear, to see how you are going to react and stuff like that. But it is necessary, I think, that we continue to stand, in the position and continue to oppose, all the advances by these hypocritical organizations like the United Nations and the Human Rights, whatever, Council and Watch, how they come to approach. We need to point it out very clear that this was an internal conflict which was solved already by the African Union, and we don't need to go back to things which happened. Ethiopia has already forgiven the rebels, so there's no need to revisit these things. And if there is any punishment, the government, the Federal Republic of Ethiopia, the democratically elected government, will find a way of dealing with this problem, who to punish and who not to punish, because this was breaking the law. This was breaking the constitution. This rebellion was lawlessness, was absolutely lawlessness. And I think that if they continue to insist, then we have to point them, to Afghanistan. We have to point them to Libya. We have to point them to Somalia. We have to point them to Iraq and the violations that went there. That we want these individuals who started these wars to be prosecuted by the International Criminal Court. And we understand that the United States is not part of the International Criminal Court. They refuse to sign up because they want to go around the world with impunity, violating the human rights of others, but at the same time talking about those human rights. So I think this should be our approach. We should be very vigilant because they're going to come back to try to trash this agreement, because they were not part. The Africans rejected them, that they should not participate. And rather, the document is saying, the United States, is saying that we don't want external actors. The external actors have to cease, destabilizing the region and supporting groups and stuff like that. So this is directed at the West. So this rejection, they will turn it into something, and then they will start coming and agitating and sabotaging here and there to find points of weaknesses. So this is what I'm seeing. But I think we have to stand very strong, and the government has to be ready for these eventualities.
Thank you, Brother Kwame, for that, bringing all these examples from the continents. Yeah, thank you. So finally, I think we can briefly share. I will be happy if you all can share briefly the way forward. Of course, yeah, we do remain optimists, but after all this discussion, if you have anything to say for the way forward from your point of view, or from what you have read so far in the events that have manifested. Let's go to Brother Gabriel.
Thank you. I would just reiterate what both Binyam and Kwame said. We need African institutions, both regional and national, to be stronger. We need African leaders to prioritize their own constituencies, and then African elites in every place to prioritize their own constituencies and an anti-imperial agenda in order to succeed. If all of our leaders are looking towards getting a job tomorrow at the World Bank or WHO, as it happens, or looking for a job, or they're sending all of their children to school in Washington, D.C. or Paris, they're not going to be loyal to Ethiopian institutions or African institutions. We have to have better integration, better institutionalization of that integration, with a very anti-imperialist approach, as Brother Kwame was saying. I would say that's the best approach. TPLF, this war, it will stay behind us. I will never say any bad thing against any party to a peace deal. I think we should let the peace deal play out. Hopefully it will work. And that's all I would say going forward.
Thank you, Gabriel. Yeah, Brother Binyam.
Thank you. Yeah, I think Gabriel has said the most important part. We need to look forward into building a better institution, regional, national, local institution. Work with them, enhance them, and they need to find their strengths, and that can only happen through experiment. We should be allowed, we should have the space to deal with our own issues. Now, the West is just simply imposing itself on us, yeah, and not always for honorable reasons, yeah. So we need to find a way to engage within the region, within our local institutions, find a way to link that to the African Union as well. African Union can only be as strong as its members, yeah? As its members are becoming stronger, and African Union will be strong as well. Kwame raised the financing issue. That reflects the weakness of member states, their inability to contribute. Even member states are dependent on aid from Western governments, yeah? And recently China and all the others, yeah, the mini powers in the Middle East. So long as you are dependent, you're not going to have an independent intra-regional institution, whether it's an IGAD, COMESA, or African Union. So we need to find strengths within our national institutions, and the people also, conscious citizens. This is very important, and I'm just underlining to what has been already said. And once again, TPLF, I think this issue is going to be behind us. I would not know how long it's going to take, but it's going to be behind us, hopefully in the shortest period of time. the material conditions already on the ground are fast ahead of what many of us are made to see and hear and know. There's so many changes are taking place. I suspect it is for the best, and I think peace would have to prevail. Yeah? We all are eager to see that. Yeah, most of all, people of Tigray deserve that. It's way too much. Yeah, way too much for them to bear, and for generation, the cost will be counted for generations, and we have a heavy burden on all of us, to rehabilitate individuals in this region, scarred by war, devastation, and that is going to be something that we have to be prepared for. And of course, the West will continue to sabotage some of what we want to achieve. Yeah? At least towards the way of asserting ourselves and being independent. Yeah, as a region, as a country, as the Horn of Africa, as Africa, because our dependence is on which they did thrive. On our chaos, they thrive. On our devastation, they gain something. Yeah, to loot, to pillage, to capitalize on our pain, they are very much aggressive. They're very much good at. It's a skill. It's a craft that they have turned out of. All those institutions that they made us believe they care for us, actually they're not. They are troops on the ground. Yeah. Remember, initially they sent missionaries, right? Then they sent anthropologists and missionaries. And then they sent humanitarian supporters. And then journalists. The list goes on, And all to, as Gabriel and Kwame has already pointed out, to make us become dependent on them eternally. And then it's what they exploit. If you start to assert yourself, that's what they do. They get rid of you. Yeah, as they get rid of Kwame Nkrumah, as they did to Sankara, as they try to do so many of our great leaders, dead and alive. That's what they have done. And the only sin that they have committed is defend the national interest of the masses. That's all they did. Those who had been looting, they had been supported. Yeah, they've been supported and abated. They were eager to contribute to their stability. Yeah, even at their own what do you call it, cost of their honor and respect. Yet it's the rooting that they have in mind at all times, the pillaging that they have contributed to our region is something that we should extricate ourselves. And the only way to do that is to start working with each other, to start embracing each other, and working toward this a better integration in the region and the communities. Even at the local level, communities need to be integrated, and I think you all understand what I mean by that. We have a long way to go. We need to start the job though somehow. And thank you for the opportunity, and I really enjoy this program very much. Thank you, Malet, for making this happen all the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Biniam. As much as you guys enjoy here, I do learn a lot. I enjoy it really. Yeah, Brother Kwame. So way forward.
Thank you very much, Mallet. Thank you to the guests, my brothers. I think that going forward, we need to be vigilant because the things we mentioned, the book from which these imperialists are playing, or they are reading from before they come and play. We know it. We know what they're going to do, their strategy, their media strategy, the propaganda and all that. We now know, because this has been repeated in the different parts of the world numerous times. So I think we just need to be very vigilant out there as Africans, not only to defend Ethiopia, but I think that this strategy, this movement, this approach that has been started in Ethiopia, where Ethiopia is winning, I think needs to be taken all across the continent. We need to start defending our continent. The vision of our forefathers in the formation of the Organization of African Unity and the African Union, which right now embodies the spirit of Pan-Africanism. The spirit of Pan-Africanism was transformed from, from just words, to a living being, a living object, which is the African Union now. It was transformed. So, regardless of how inefficient, how wanting the African Union is, that is the embodiment of the spirit of Pan-Africanism. And it is up to us now to work on it and perfect it and make it what we want it to be. So the spirit lives in there. So our forefathers wanted us to have a union government. That was the original vision of the formation of a union in Addis Ababa in 1963. So that means today we have to take on that task. We have to take on that responsibility of looking across the whole continent and taking care of it. We are being manipulated because we have, to a certain extent, neglected our responsibility. We have so much over-concentrated in different regions and left our continent to be occupied by these groups. So they see that we are careless. We are mentioning, other people are mentioning even tribes. They're mentioning their tribes in the various 54 or 55 countries. So they neglect the whole continent, and these guys, they take advantage of that. So I think going forward, we need to pay close attention to what is happening across the continent, because it's a huge landmass and we all exist here. It is not some small island which is isolated somewhere. So what affects one person, in one part of the continent affects the other. You remember that in 2011, when Libya was being attacked, we never knew that these rebels would reach all the way to Burkina Faso, Ivory Coast, and even Mozambique. They're now in the south. So this negligence, I think, especially we, the next generation of leaders, the next generation of the youth, we have to pay close attention when these guys are manipulating, when these colonialists and exploiters are manipulating the continent. So that is the message out there, which I would like to leave to all Africans who are watching, that what affects Ethiopia affects you if you are in Ivory Coast or the Gambia, and affects you in the same way if you are living in Morocco or Algeria. All these countries, Africans, there's no Middle East in Africa. So I think that one also has to be made very, very clear, that there's no Middle East in the African continent. So we have to pay close attention to the events that are going on across our continent. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, my brothers, really, for that interesting. And also to our audience who have been here with us, listening to you. Most of them said, they do agree with your view, but I will read a couple of them, where a kind of a question. Audrey says, it's a disrespect to Africans, the West pretending to be a babysitter to make the children don't misbehaving. Why, for God's sake, the Africans doesn't refuse the meddling of the Western countries? Yeah, I have as simple as that. I have a question why Mike Hammer is allowed in that room, but of course, Brother Gabriel has explained it very well. Why? Yeah. So it's a right question. Another one, Udre also commented, maybe this goes to Kwame, the current Western darlings are Kenya and Ghana, the former colonies of the Europeans. They are trying to divide us by their common manipulation. We should be smarter than that. We know better. And Africans have their own way of solving problems by Text. Yeah, thank you very much. Also, the audience, really, we try to do this every week regularly. It's a Pan-African media platform. Not only Ethiopia is discussed, also other issues that are happening in the continent, but unfortunately not in a good way. Ethiopia has been topical for the past 2 years, so that's why we have been discussing most of the time Ethiopia, but we have discussed also the Horn of Africa and others, what is happening in the continent. Thank you very much again, my brothers, and until next time. Thank you.
Thank you all, and good night.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, and you have a good night.
Ciao, ciao.
Happy
Bye.
weekend.
Yeah, same to you. Yeah, bye.